Okay, so first of all, just to break the ice, it's supposed to be tale as in a story, not so it was supposed to be kind of a spin-off for the Dickens story of Tale of Two Cities. So right there, that just breaks the ice and calms me down a little bit. So, okay. So just a brief bio about myself. I work for EllisDon. I started with EllisDon about 3 years ago. I started up here in Edmonton. I worked at the control tower. Funny enough, I was not with EllisDon, but I was also involved with the renovation of this place. I've played a wide variety of roles in the construction industry, starting off as a field engineer coordinator. I've been a superintendent and currently down in Calgary right now for EllisDon. I work as the BIM manager, and we have about five different coordinators deployed on four different sites. So that's my bio. So one of the main reasons I submitted a speech or a presentation for this conference was because it was owner directed, and what we have going on down in Calgary is pretty interesting because it's been owner directed that these 3 towers that the consultants use a BIM. So they had BIM execution plans, and they were to share it with the general contractors, and the general contractors were to go, we do our stuff, and I'll explain that as we get along here. So just to make sure I get my points down. So the other thing too is that we have 3 different towers in the downtown core, all starting at different times. So we really want to build on our lessons learned. We're creating our own trends that we use on other projects, but really focusing them and again building on the lessons learned. So this is these are the 3 different towers. This is kind of like BIM porn. There's some really detailed information on here from a modeling perspective for 3 different towers done by 3 different owners, 3 different consulting teams, and 1 general contractor. So so here are the 3 towers again, and what I have there is just like a crescendo. We started off with the first tower, and we're using the tools that we have, but we're going to keep building up and keep adding implementing new strategies and trends and stuff like that. So some of the stuff that we're starting off with all the towers is that in the specification or the scope of work for subcontractors is that they're required to model and go through the coordination process, and that'll be on all 3 towers, and starting on 2 of them at this point. So we're also looking at increasing the level of development of the subcontractors' models, and then making sure that it gets deployed to the site, meaning that we go through the coordination process, and then they create drawings, and then it goes to site and things are installed as per the model, right? So so that's the 3 towers. We're going to again increase the level of usage on all 3 as we go through this process and develop on our lessons learned. Okay. So the trades that are typically involved that we all here probably see, we have the structural steel, we have curtain walls, all mechanical systems, and electricals. So we are looking at implementing controls, elevators, and also looking at using these models to do the concrete forming. So when creating shop drawings or deriving geometry from it. So there's that. The other thing that we're working on, sorry, I'll just go back to this. Sorry, the BIM coordination process, excuse me. The BIM coordination process being used here is pretty typical, but one thing that we're trying to implement is we got the trades, we do the coordination, goes back and forth, and then what we want to do, because there's so much effort that goes into creating drawings, that we want everyone to get in the same room and sign off on the model that it's at the state that it's in. And we've also had some buy-in from the consultants who will come to the meeting and say, okay, we agree with this, and in principle, we still do need to see the drawing. So that's been one thing. And then we transition to the paper, and we go to the installation drawings. Okay, so what we've also done is starting to implement steel shop drawing review in the model environment. So interesting situation where we actually had the consultants, everyone on the consulting side committed to this, EllisDon did. The subcontractor really wanted it. They came out and we developed, in a 4-hour session, we developed some procedures, right? And then everyone made the commitment that they weren't going to use the PDFs, even though with the shop drawing, the PDFs come along, but no one's going to mark up a PDF. They're going to use the procedures that we work. And we're creating we have a living document and we're creating that. And so hopefully from there, we're going to have kind of some set standards. And then we can also look at putting that into the specifications for other jobs. So we'll just go back. So that's what you're looking at. You see that's some big transfer beams. And over here, you have all the stuff that you would have with the drawings on the right-hand side there. So we're only on approval 3, so we'll see how it goes. So actually, I'm going to go back. One thing that we're hoping is everyone talks about the speed. So what we're really hoping to do and what the goal was is to provide clarity and certainty, not really pushing for anyone to guarantee that they're going to push their shop drawings through quicker. We'll stuck to the same process, but because it is also a learning experience for everybody, right? But the commitment was there, so that's the important thing. Oh, geez, Lord. All right, so one of the things that we're doing, and probably most of the people here understand, with that coordination process is we have, all the subtrade are submitting their models, and we have progress models or live models. So the information's there. The subcontractor's intent is there. It may change until we get that sign off. So one of the things that I see as a trend for us is that now we can start getting people on our sites, like other coordinators, using some of the free viewers, instead of going through getting all 6 or 7 drawings together to understand what's going on, is that they have this and they know that the state that it's at, and they know that that this maybe there might change, or maybe they find a problem. So it's getting to that point, especially when we get the subcontractors to present give us progress models. Nothing that's an official submission. It's just, this is where we're going, this is where the state of our model is at this point. So the other thing that I see as kind of a trend, and it's been asked by consultants when they give their models over to us, they say, well, what are you going to do with it? And well, as a general contractor, we're going to be like, we're not going to do anything with it. With concrete buildings, I think that there is an opportunity to come to an agreement with the consultants or everybody, is that so sleeving on a concrete building is key. But there's some designed openings, and then there's some submitted, submitted from whoever needs a sleeve in there, needs a buck out. So one thing that I've been thinking about that would be really good is if that's updated, because if we're talking about mechanical, they're actually modeling in their sleeves and they're creating drawings from that. So then we submit the sleeving drawings, but it doesn't get put into the concrete model. So we can actually transmit that to whoever, and they can update, and then all the sleeves and buckouts will be in there, and then it's a really quick way to do a check. So that to me, I think is something that you need to work out with, from who's going to take that and who's going to own that. You don't want too many people touching a drawing and, a model. So, and it doesn't seem like a monumental task to do that. So I see concrete and the concrete being used that way. The other thing that with the live model, especially when we're getting, if we're going through tender packages or we're going through different releases or there's major changes, one thing we did on one of our projects is we just went over to the rebar guy and said, here's a free viewer, here's a model, we're going to update it for you, we'll help you learn how to do this. So this is going to provide, hopefully if you use it, we're going to provide some more clarity for you. I've got some stories about the first tower we're doing where there was a lot of overpoured and underpoured things just simply because of time, all the things that we go through on a construction site. Nothing catastrophic, but it was, you know, somebody had to go back. We poured more concrete. There was more rebar. There's some times where you're building stuff off of the rebar drawings when, you know, when you're under the gun. So those sort of things, if we get other people with looking at the model that's there, it's going to be, if you get other people to look at the model and provide that clarity and then go back to the drawings to double check, then I think we're going to see a lot more certainty in our projects. So other trends and workflows that I'm seeing going on here is especially from a field engineer usage. So using the models, what we've done is we've actually lined up our models to the project grids. So at any point you can select and you can, not the project grids, the project coordinates that we use that the field engineers are using. So at any point you can pick and you can get all three coordinates and know where you are. So that we all know that there's add-ons out there. So, but we're getting to the point where we're going to be working with the field engineers. So, and that seemed to really grab some of the field engineers, especially when you do things like that and you're trying to get people to look at models and they want to know where they are instead of it's just some random coordinate, then it really starts bringing things in. We've also had some luck with implementing our own set of grid lines, because some of the Navisworks is what we mostly use, that you can't measure off grid lines. But how do you build something if you can't measure off grid lines or know where something is? So, so again, I've talked about this, but using concrete formwork shops, so creating that from the models. I think some of the things that I've seen that Revit can do, I think it's quite possible. Instead of going and having, the foreman on site with the big drawings, why are we not just taking these models, sequencing them and then giving them shop drawings, formwork shop drawings. So I think that's coming, I think, fairly quickly. The other thing that the gentleman before me was talking about, he's creating all this great data that they're putting in there and then putting into the families and the stuff that comes out of Revit and some of the other models or modeling softwares that are used. And but we don't harness any of that, right? But we're very rarely do we on a construction site, and it's all there. I've seen on one construction site, it's a big one. One's coordinator's job for 2 weeks was to take and enter in all of the doors from this project. So they were going through the door schedule and they were entering it into Excel so that they could manipulate it the way they needed to for installation. And I said, well, why don't we just try exporting this from the design model? And that took 2 hours instead of the 2 weeks or whatever it was going to take them to do, and then the introduction of error. So that's where I think there's a huge potential to do that, is use the data that's already in there. We're seeing, and from some of our clients, the use of facility management and using the models from a facility management perspective. It's something that we all know can be very useful from an owner's perspective, but it's grabbing hold. But I think that's certainly something, especially as we get people more accustomed to looking at models, and then maybe their guys are going to want, their facility managers are going to want to be looking at it as well. And we are starting to get more buy-in on the construction site. We're starting to get more buy-in. We're not getting more people looking at the model, but we're getting more people coming to us, or coming to people like myself, and saying, what is this? I'm confused, I can't see this, what does the model say? So it's still no leaps and bounds, but at least they know it's there and they don't just go, blah, I'll just walk away. So I'm seeing that. So some of the challenges, one of the biggest challenges on these three projects was convincing the owners or whoever to get the mechanical and electrical trades in earlier. The reason being is right now what we'll do is we'll pay time and material until the tender closes or until the buyout. of the mechanical and electrical. So we're paying time and material, but there's no one putting the planning and forethought into the tower. As we know, a tower, everything comes down, right? So so if you want to change something up here, it's going to have a big effect down here, especially from a gravity perspective. So getting them in earlier, right now what we're doing is on one of them we're playing a lot of catch up, and it's causing the subtrade a great deal of stress, and it causes stress on site because everyone wants to believe that we're planning ahead, but you're not planning ahead if you're getting it there just on time. So that I think would be very helpful. The other is, even though we're getting more buying, if I did a quick calculation in my head, from the general down to including all the subtrade, the only people using the models is about 2% of the people. Now, a lot of the people are using byproducts of the model, meaning the drawings, right? So it's a challenge just to get people to change their ways or understand it. Getting models to the field. Now, from my perspective, it's still not really there. We need to, the applications need to be improved, but if we're going to use these models going forward, we really need to find the way in the workflow to get them to the field. There, I should probably look at this instead of going like that, but getting trades to follow their interference drawing. So so I've got two stories. The importance, so if the mechanical contractor went through this big effort, they modeled everything, the drawings went in for approval. These drawings are now essentially as-built unless there's a major change that we didn't foresee. I went down to check on installation because I wanted to see are they building as per the drawings. I saw four I don't know if they were journeymen, but I saw 4 plumbers. And what they did is they just installed. They saw a drain, and they saw the other drain, and they just went. Now, there's 2 problems with that. 1, they shouldn't be installing anything that we haven't verified and gone through the process. And 2, they were right over a drive aisle, and the drains were hitting my head. And they said, well, that's the only way to get there. And I pulled up the drawings, and I said, well, this is the way we plan to get there. And they're like, oh, yeah, could have gone that way. So the problem with that is we had the superintendent involved with these design, in the coordination meetings. But the problem was that he didn't beat it into his guys to say that you actually have a drawing to install from. It's not the design drawings. It's our drawing. We created it. Follow it. So they lost, I don't know, I'm guessing anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 just on labor because they didn't follow that. Another interesting one is it's very similar to that. What we did is ended up being an overpour on a beam, and what happened? So nobody put a sleeve in. So the guy went around. I've never seen this before, but he went around probably about 20 meters to get to his drain. Instead of looking at the drawings again and saying, well, I should have gone through here, I could have checked the drawings, and then gone to us saying, you owe us a sleeve through here because this was a plan, you didn't pour correctly. And again, just costs that could have been avoided. Okay. Just making sure I got everything here because I'm speaking a little too fast. Anyways, I'm going to go on to my next slide, and you're probably going to laugh, and I'm hopefully going to explain myself properly here. And there's a question to everybody here from what I'm seeing on, geez, I missed that. Sorry. Sorry, guys. Other trends and workflows. Sorry, I went back. There. Here we go. So these 3 towers, from my perspective, we could have built them without 80 to 90% of the design and some of the sub-trade 2D drawings. All the information is there. If we had the people who could, read the models, right? So my question is sometimes so we talk about trying to try to make this industry better. And I know there's lots of reasons why we need the models, paper documents, but all the information there, it's just we need to figure out how to build from it and how to do all those other things. So, anyways, I think it would just be a huge savings in time and money if we were able to do that. And I think that there's lots of, what we need to do is just find those workflows. What's happening on sites now, what I find is interesting is that we have drawing tables full of the big drawings, but nobody's sitting at those looking at them anymore. Everyone's at their computer looking at a PDF of the drawings, and there could be updated PDFs, but no. So why aren't we looking at the models to build it? So I know there's lots of reasons why, but it's possible at this stage with these 3 projects. It's very possible to have done that if you have the people who can build from it that way. So, anyways, I'm well under my time, but that's about it. That's all I have. So.
Well, thank you, Phil. I think it brings up some interesting points just towards the end of your comments there, Phil, about documentation. We've basically lived in a document-centric environment for just slightly over 200 years. And here we have the technology. And I was reflecting back that about 100 years ago, people couldn't make the paradigm shift when automobiles came around, so they simply called them horseless carriages. So I think documentation is our horseless carriage that we're facing right now. And knowing that documentation is such a large part of what architects and engineers do, it's interesting what Phil brings up, that if that effort was put into a data-centric environment versus a document-centric environment, how much better would our buildings actually be if we took those raw hours that we spend doing drawing after drawing? And the reality is, with BIM, we're doing more drawings now than we ever did before, because we can slice the building in 50 places and stick a few notes on it and make it look good. So I think it's an interesting discussion, but I wouldn't mind getting some comments while we have a couple of minutes.
How do the contracts exist yet? Are we at that point where we can look at the model and say that this is legally binding?
Yeah, the contractual framework is clearly one, and that's why I think in all of this, if we move towards a more integrated project delivery model, we begin to change instrumentally the nature of contract. At the end of the day, if everybody's a party to one contract, then they're not going to be suing each other. And I think we're relying too heavily on lawyers and insurers scaring the hell out of us, when in fact I would suggest that we do other things that are more liable, such as not communicating as well as we can. And here's a device that allows us to. So it's a good point. You know, contractually, do we need to move away from liability around a model? Good thought.
Yeah, so I think one of the bigger problems that makes architects and designers and consultants in general nervous is that they don't have any way to stamp an infinite view of the model, so that they can go through that model and stamp that. If we could devise a way that, you know, we could certify models, I think that would really help push that into a paperless kind of realm.
So I kind of just building off of what Reid said, he's kind of suggesting that you should have a blanket statement for stamping an entire model. And we've found that it's easier to approve certain elements within models, like this is detailed for fabrication, this is not. This part of the model you can use for construction, this part you can't, because the software isn't there yet where everything is detailed to a point where you can use it on construction. Yeah. So the software is a little bit lagging, so you kind of have to just put it in an Excel sheet and say, this part yes, this part no.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've often had this thought experiment. You know, if, for example, we closed the doors here today and pumped in a gas that gave us all amnesia of how we put buildings together and how we did them, but the gas doesn't take away your skill set. So if you're a contractor, you're still a contractor, architect, you're still an architect. And then we had somebody come into the room and say, I want you to design a tower. What would we do different? How much of it is, as Brittany and Reid has just said, is actually baggage that we're carrying around with us in this process? Do we have the capability to move forward? Do we have a willingness to perhaps tell owners, no, we're not going to submit on your RFP unless it's done this way?
Just further to the topic of integrated project delivery, like contracts is a big thing, but I think as an industry, we need to have a better understanding of what our partners need from the model. So as an engineer, for example, I should have a clear understanding of what the GC wants to see in that model, or the steel fabricator, or if we're getting into talking about formwork. So, when I hand it over, it's useful. I think it's a big part. Like, we just need to be in an environment on a project where we're communicating directly rather than throwing it over the fence. So I guess it does go back to contracts. But
yeah, so on that point, when you think about, again, going back to the traditional framework, we do a detailed design and then we estimate it. We do a detailed design and then try to construct it. I've often wondered, why are we just not simply doing the opposite? Do a detailed estimate and design to the detailed estimate. And instead of trying to construct what we design, why don't we simply design to what is constructible? And I think that inherently is what we've got backwards, and the change that we need. And I think the change around BIM is such that it isn't in itself the change, it's merely the catalyst to allow us the change. And so I think it's important for us to begin thinking of how we can make that change actually happen, considering the broad spectrum of people we have in this room today, which is the largest BIM gathering of business ever in Canada. And we have an opportunity to begin to think about how those changes could take place. I know I, for one, envy the younger ones in the room. You're at a point in your careers where you've got a great world opening up. I think you need to change it. And us old farts need to help you get there. So any other thoughts?
I'm going to play a devil's advocate a little bit and look at it from an architectural creativity point of view. And you just said, why don't we design to what is constructible? And I think if that's all we do, we probably wouldn't be here today, because we're here today because there was a design of something that wasn't constructible, and then BIM and the process made it constructible. So that's a difficult topic really to address. It's like the dog chasing its own tail. So I just wanted to comment on that. We can't tie our hands by saying let's just design what's constructible, because then this would die. I think we need to keep that creativity in it, to push it and keep pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, Pietro, I would agree. It is the observation that we're taking it away. Honestly, I think the reverse would happen. We would unleash untold creativity if we got the process right. Because the problem we have right now is architects and engineers don't understand construction, and contractors don't understand designers. And that isn't the fault of those individuals. It was the fault, and actually you can blame an architect. 1813, Sir John Soane created this notion that the two should be forever separate. So I think that in itself, Pietro, I think there's a harnessed, it's just bottled up, that if we get it right, contractors would understand design better, and we would understand constructability, and our buildings would be instrumentally different, would look different, would feel different. And if we consider that there's about 60% waste in our process, in the next 18 years globally, I think it's something like $7.8 trillion in vertical and horizontal infrastructure. What could we do if we stripped away 60% of that and then put it into things that we could design and build better? So I agree, we don't want that to happen, but I think if we use the old process, what you say, Pietro, will happen. If we use new processes, we don't have to have it happen.
Cesar Ruiz, part of Autodesk, based out of Toronto. Happy to be here. The value proposition that I'd like to just to have everybody remind themselves is look at the curves for technology adoption changing within the industry. So CAD, starting out with Autodesk within '82 as a company coming out, how long did it take to go from the Mylars to the Vellums to the CADs, which now DWG is pretty much a standard, it's a delivery method which is expected, right? At a minimum, you're gonna deliver CAD. So how many years is that? 82 to 30 many years. And look at the short cycle within BIM, right? So I can, speaking selfishly from my own standpoint, BIM to us, when we're talking about Revit, was 2004 for us as a catalyst to where we are today, 10 years, right? That is a shortened cycle of transition. So standard of care now is drawings, DWG, electronic format, something electronic. Please don't necessarily give us paper. And now we're talking about BIM, and we're trying to do, I wouldn't say standard of care, it has to be BIM, but my guess is that that curve of adoption to get to a shorter non-paper or non-drawing, there's certainly going to be paper, but non-drawing kind of delivery, I think is going to become more and more. And the last comments about talking about process, we're talking about people, we're talking about technology. You have to embrace those three pieces to really pull it all together for a concise model delivery package. And I know from the technology side, we're seeing a lot of improvements from, I'm just astounded with the amount of technology that's out there and the rate of adoption to technology like 3D printing and stuff like that. So I think once we solve some bandwidth issues for technology, once we solve some portability issues for technology, it's just a matter of changing, adopting ourselves with the people and the processes that we're working with on a day-to-day basis. It's going to be small steps, but I think we'll get to that deliverable sooner than later. And I don't think it'll be 30 and plus years to get there. I think it'll be there probably within the next 5 to 10 years if I had to guess. More so than not.
Good, thanks, Cesar.
So really quickly to comment to Cesar's suggestion there, ultimately we're managing expectations. We are all at different levels in this room and on every project. So what do you guys think of the suggestion of putting the expectations or a statement of expectation directly in your project execution plans? Ultimately, we are tackling BIM project to project to project. If everybody knows what level everybody is at, clear the playing field, put a statement of expectation into your execution plan, and then work forward together.
Good point. David.
Dave McCarricker from the Mitchell Partnership. I'm a mechanical engineer that has adopted Revit and Revit MEP in our practices. And one of the things that we're talking about here, well, everybody's sort of talking at this sort of nebulous level about model versus papers. The comment I really want to make goes to our practice internally, and I just want everybody to think of a battery of washrooms in a high-rise office building. For us to go in and model every pipe and drain connection on every toilet and urinal and sink costs us a phenomenal amount of time. So one of the things we've been doing in our practice is we're just taking the main drain and water lines into these washrooms and then through schematics on the assumption that the plumbers can make everything fit, and we've tested this somehow, is we, through 2D schematics, show how those pipes and drains are then connected up to those plumbing fixtures. And it saves us a phenomenal amount of time, but what it does is it leaves some information out of the model, and the information that is missing is found in these 2D sheets. So to say that we're going to take away from, or get away from the 2D sets, we have to sort of consider that, what that means also to, well, everybody in the room. And I'm using washrooms as an example, but I'm sure you could say the same thing is true of light fixtures or light switches in a room too, from the electrical standpoint. So just food for thought. Before we start throwing out those paper drawings, they do have a use, and they do, some of us do save some money using them. So,
yeah. Thanks, Dave. Be gone, you bad drawings. So thank you for contribution, and thanks, Phil, for making this opportunity happen.